Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
That worked very smoothly. I'm very happy with that. All right. Welcome to Thoughts from the Movies. My name is Josh L. Sass, and with me, as always, the Hollywood man himself, Justin Luderin, and the king of everything that needs ranking, Austin Moorhead. Gentlemen, how are we on this fine afternoon, whatever? I realize I shouldn't say
Fantastic.
afternoon, but
Yeah, we're
Fantastic.
doing good. We got sunshine outside. It's nice weather. It's like 70 some degrees, so not too hot, not too chilly.
and
I was doing this outside, but no Wi-Fi out there. So
And we have just like a heartwarming, fun, sunshiny movie to go over today, which is The Killing of a Sacred Deer by Justin. Help me out with this name.
Yeah, Yorgos Lanthimos.
Starring Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, and I'll say Barry Keoghan, however you say that guy's name.
You know what's funny is we can't even pretend that this is like a funny movie because
No.
it's like the title is just so violent. It's
Yes.
like this great, wonderful, lighthearted movie, The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Which
The violent murder of a peaceful animal.
And in the first 5 minutes, it's just open heart surgery. So, it's the killing of everything that is sacred with movies is how I'm going to start describing it. Austin, why did we watch this movie?
I love the company that manufactures all of these movies from A24. I thought it was interesting that they incorporated a guy like I can't even remember the main guy's name.
Colin Farrell?
Colin Farrell, yeah. I thought that was interesting to throw him and Nicole Kidman into a role like this. I've always been very high on these movies. I loved Hereditary. I loved Midsommar. Those two movies, even though my girlfriend really doesn't appreciate them because they still give her nightmares to this day, I enjoy very suspenseful and, I'll just say it, creepy stuff in movies. I think it really, whether you want to believe it or not, it locks you in on the focus of it 24/7, even if you are very unsure of what you're watching, because you're like, I can't turn away from this because it's terrifying and yet interesting.
So let me go through A24, the movies they've produced here. So one that is near and dear to Justin and mine's heart, and we should probably do one day, is Locke. Some other ones, Tusk.
I like that movie too.
Yeah. If you've seen Tusk, this is like artsy Tusk. The Lobster, which is a movie that I really like, by the same director. Into the Forest, Moonlight. I mean, they're really just kind of known for this, yeah.
They're an indie studio, and they're arguably the most successful one right now and the most well-known one. They've only been around for a few years, but their success rate is pretty strong at the Academy, and they make a lot of small but very critically well-reviewed films that occasionally do well at the box office, but nothing crazy. But they're a true indie company. They make indie films, and they have a great track record with directors and the films that they make. So people know their movies. And they put out a lot too. I mean, they're a full-on indie studio. They acquire movies, they distribute and produce their own. So if anyone looked up their credits, they would know a lot of their movies. Yeah. A24.
Okay. So yeah.
In Austin, had you seen this movie before or no?
Yeah.
I have not. This was the first time that I had dived into it. And like I said, the cast alone was interesting enough for me to go, okay, I want to see how they do in an A24 production. Because like I said, they're known for making you very still in your seat, creeped out, and wondering what the hell is going to happen. Putting people like Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell in this, I was like, set me up for it. I'm right there.
So let's
and had you guys seen Yorgos's other movies that other people would know? The Lobster, Josh, you said you had seen, and then The Favorite, which was his latest movie that did really well at the Oscars. Not this past one, I think last year.
I have not seen The Favorite. I had seen The Lobster. Now, let me put this preface. We did not finish The Lobster. We had to go somewhere and just totally slipped my mind, and we never finished watching it.
How far into it did you get? Because in the midpoint, it really changes movies.
I'm now being told that we did finish it.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember how it ends.
Great. It was so good. It was so good you completely forgot that you had watched it.
Well, I remember because they run away from, spoilers, they ran away from, like, the resort, and they're, like, living on their own inside the thing. But I don't remember how the movie ends. Austin, have you seen this movie?
This is the one that I have not seen. I've seen most of the hyped up ones that I've seen. And not saying The Lobster wasn't hyped up, but I had never heard of it personally.
I'm being told by my producer that he tries to stab himself in the eye, Colin Farrell does? Man, I don't remember that at all.
Well, when they escape the hospital or the resort or whatever, which is like midway through the movie, him and I believe Rachel Weisz is the girl in that one. But I think he is, or she goes blind. I think one of them is blind when they're in the forest, right?
Okay, that's Anastasia's now. Yeah, Rachel Weisz goes blind, so Colin Farrell is going to go blind so that he's like her. Man, I wish I could.
I don't remember how the movie ends, to be fair, but it's irrelevant because we're not doing that movie. But
no, this movie at least had a clear-cut ending that I vividly will remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Austin, I'm starting to see your tastes very clearly between Mystic River and Evil Dead and now this. I feel like I really have pinned down the type of movies that you're into.
Well, I mean, don't put me in a box here, man. I mean, this is just my favorite stuff to enjoy personally.
So let's talk about this cast. Because on the surface, you're like, okay, Colin Farrell, like, all he does is, like, what seems like weird indie movies anymore, right? He doesn't do any more big blockbuster romantic comedy stuff. Nicole Kidman, a.k.a., like, the best, like, leading lady through the 90s and early 2000s. So, like, seeing her in a movie was bizarre because I really haven't seen her in much lately. And then Barry Keoghan, who's in Dunkirk. I have not seen Dunkirk, but the kid plays a disturbed child very well. And then the daughter, Rafi Cassidy, really, her big film that I recognize is Snow White and the Huntsman. But Tomorrowland, I guess, is also a big one, too. Now I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
the
final main character is Sunny Suljic, who is the lead of mid-90s, which was the wow. I need to
Jonah Hill's skateboard movie.
Thank you. Yeah. I need to like take Alpha Brain before this or something. But yeah, so that cast kind of feels like a bizarre hodgepodge. But they're all very serious actors, and they all do drama very well. And this movie needed that, I guess. Like, it's what I'm trying to get at is like, I would not have put this cast together ever. Like, if I was in charge of casting, this would have never been my cast. But I think they nailed the casting because when we get to our things later, I don't know who I would recast, to be honest with you.
It's interesting that you say that about Colin Farrell and Nicole, because Nicole Kidman's actually had a really strong renaissance the last couple of years. She's been in everything, and I mean everything. I don't know, it depends if you've seen them, obviously, or not, but she was in Aquaman. She did a movie called The Beguiled, which came out the same year as this, and was at Cannes with Colin Farrell was in that. She did a movie called Lion. She did a movie called Boy Erased with Russell Crowe. I mean, Nicole Kidman's actually... She did Destroyer. I mean, she has been all over the place the last couple of years. surprisingly. And then Colin Farrell, he, for a long time when he was doing the movies that he was the star in, he was doing a lot of crap, like stuff that just didn't land, like the Total Recall reboot and all these different things that he was the actual lead for. But when he plays a supporting role or more of a part of an ensemble, he actually does some really interesting movies. He was really good in Saving Mr. Banks, the Disney movie about Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney. He was good in The Beguiled, as I said, which was a Sofia Coppola film. And he was in Dumbo, which was fine, but he was decent in it. So Colin Farrell, I think, was considered not that great for a long time, but he's slowly, as he's matured and gotten older, done better roles in better movies. And I wouldn't say either of them have really disappeared from the zeitgeist. I just think the movies that they have seen have not been too big for the most part, but they've both been doing a lot of work and have both been doing really good, talented work. So, and that was on, full display here, I thought.
I agree. Now, I did not, obviously you're much more up on that kind of stuff than I am. I remember seeing The Lobster and thinking how good he was in that. So, like, when Austin picked this movie, I was like, okay, awesome. Like, it's going to be the same type of whatever. You know what I mean? Same director, same leading guy. Like, I can get into this. And I don't know that I ever 100% got into it.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of on that same boat. Do one of you guys want to run over the basic plot real quick for those who?
I actually kept notes this week, better notes than I normally do. All right, so first 5 minutes are open heart surgery. Thanks, Austin.
Yeah, that was a very jarring way to start, wasn't it? I mean, it's literally like an extreme close up on the heart as it's being poked and prodded and pumping and stuff, and you're right there. That was jarring.
Yes. And then we kind of get our first taste of the director's style, where shot composition is going to be dramatic and it's going to force you to look where he wants you to, all that kind of stuff. Immediately with the long pull down the hallway between him and the anesthesiologist talking about a watch, and then when we start to do these long push-in shots on all sorts of stuff. Justin, I have a technical question for you. Do they do those long pushes in camera still, or is that all done in post?
No, that would still all be in camera. Yeah, those are full-on tracking shots, yeah. Okay. All those long hallways and all the side-to-side and push-ins and push-outs. Yep.
Okay. So we get a taste, too, for, I think, another calling card of Yorgos. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Of Yorgos, like, style. And it's his because he wrote this, correct?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There were two writers. He was one of them, yeah.
Okay. So this and The Lobster, I feel like every conversation between a character, it feels like they're having two conversations in the same sentence. So one of them is about the plot, and then the other one is about something that has nothing to do with anything except for small talk. So if I was talking to Austin about his hat, right, I'd be like, your hat is magnificent. By the way, there's a dead person in your car. Like, that's how, like, all of the dialogue feels, where it's like, here's 3 sentences about what's going on, and then here's a flyaway sentence that you're not sure why it's there. Particularly, I'm talking about we're being introduced to Colin Farrell's Steve, his character's life. So we get this very weird interaction with this young man that we're not sure who he is. And then we get to meet his wife and his kids all at the dinner table. And then a very bizarre scene that I still don't 100% understand is that Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman's character's name is Anna. So Steve and Anna are going to bed. And Anna undresses down to her underwear and then lays on the bed as if she's a dead body. And that's like foreplay for them. Also, let's go here. Kids should not be watching this show. There's a lot of sex and a lot of violence that we have to talk about. And we're not going to talk about it in a PG way. So just get that out there now. So officially at the 11 o'clock mark, or the 11-minute mark, I'm captivated, confused, a little turned on. We know the main character is a surgeon. He's has an adolescent Asian friend named Martin. He's not Asian, obviously. I figured that out later. He has a family with Nicole Kidman, 2 young kids, and he likes to act like she's dead to fuck her. What?
There's a lot of elements, man. There are.
Yeah.
And they do a callback to it later in the movie.
Yeah.
But I still don't understand. Actually, they call back to it twice in the movie. Now I'm thinking about it. But I don't understand. Like, this to me only just, I guess, suggests that he's weird, right? I don't know. Like, why? This is such a very, like, this will stick in your mind hours after that movie is over. And I feel like it has no context to the rest of the plot. Can somebody fill me in?
I firmly believe that they are trying to interpret the family as a very weirdly strict society, in a sense, because we see from the movie perspective that they don't act like a normal family, right? To most, I mean, I guess you could, and maybe this goes along with the dialogue and everything, because I have my own picks with the dialogue. For the dialogue sense, there hasn't been a single change of tone in dialogue throughout this entire movie. It seems like even if it's not like yelled or whispered, everything is put strangely along in a straight line, so to speak. You know, there's no
in a straight line. How is in terms of like their tone is very even, or
yeah, it's like
in terms of
yeah, it doesn't matter like what's happening. Everybody seems like they're speaking at the same tone and volume throughout this entire film, with no interesting, like, I shouldn't say interesting, no weird changes, like how a normal person would react to a situation. Does that make sense? Or like,
yeah, and I think that was part of The Lobster too, is they spoke the very same way. It's like when, you know, and the plot of that movie is you have 30 days to find yourself a lover at their, you know, like a partner at this resort. Otherwise, you turn into an animal. And one of the conversations Colin Farrell has, they're asking him what kind of animal he'd want to be. And it's like it goes over as just a totally normal conversation. He's like, yes, I've already thought about it. A lobster. That's what I'd like to turn into. And it's just like the same kind of even keeled, just like you were saying. And this one does that for most of the movie. And then at the end, there's sort of some yelling and there's more emotion coming out. But I think part of that is establishing this family as a very sort of structured and very procedural type of family. Like they're all going about their routine very strictly, and the foreplay with them is part of their both of the parents are in the medical field. And so when Nicole Kidman undresses and she asks him like what he wants to do, and he tells her general anesthetics, right? And that's like the type of foreplay that they're going to do that night, where she just lays on bed and just pretends like she's out of it. And, you know, I guess that's just part of their life, you know, because everyone has their own weird kinks and stuff, but that's showing you this family's part of that, you know, because they're such a medically based family, that just filters in. And again, they have a very strict and structured and life that seems on the surface like it's the American dream with a nice house and the 2 kids and all the nice cars and good job and everything. But it's very surface level. And once you dig under that, you find out a lot more disturbing things about this family.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All of that went over my head while watching the film. So that's why we have these conversations, kids. I'm you. Yeah. I'm the average viewer. No. So then.
But the main, but like the overarching thing, right, is that Colin Farrell is a cardiologist, and he's seeing this kid, Martin, played by Barry Keoghan, who they don't ever clarify if he's like a mental patient of his or whatever. Like,
no, they do. Shrink, so they do. So Steve operated on his father,
right,
and killed him,
or someone killed him. He died, but
right.
Who killed him is sort of the source of conflict throughout the movie or discussion.
Yeah,
and so that's
the father died, and then he had been speaking to the kid recently about it, I guess, just
Right.
in like an unofficial capacity.
Right. I have some more, like, I feel like there were a couple of things that were just kind of left to open interpretation that needed explanation in this film, for sure.
Definitely.
So then,
as they're like speaking and getting to know each other or whatever, then all of a sudden one day the kid Martin is like, by the way, since you killed my father, now you have a choice. You have to kill one of your kids who are slowly their health is gonna start deteriorating until you kill one of them or they die. And it's like a stage of, it goes from paralysis to not eating to their eyes start bleeding to death is like the stage that it goes through. And that's like halfway through the movie, it comes out that that's his plan, is that the kid tells the doctor that's the choice that he has to make. And then his kids slowly, their health deteriorates, and it's like a dilemma of what to do, and sort of this psychological game of cat and mouse. But I don't know that I loved the way it came off.
Explain.
In terms of the whole dynamic between Barry Keoghan's character Martin and Colin Farrell. And I think, like Josh said, there was a lot of things that went unexplained.
yeah, I mean...
No, go ahead.
So, I think when you name your movie something so pronounced as the killing of a sacred deer, and deer is obviously a play, because it's meant to be a loved one, not an actual deer. But, I feel like you've already put it in our heads that, one, someone's gonna die, right? And two, that, like, there's some weird voodoo hooky-dooky shit going on, right? Because it's like a cult at the very least, if not even more paranormal than that. So, for most of the movie, the first half of the movie, I think that Colin Farrell is grooming Martin to become the sacrificial deer. I have no idea why he needs the deer. I have no idea what is going on other than that. And that's what, like, I'm so hyper-focused on, that the rest of the plot makes no sense to me. Like, when Colin Farrell goes to meet Martin's mom, and Martin's mom tries to sleep with Colin Farrell, and Colin Farrell's like, no, I'm a married man. I'm like, okay, cool. So maybe this is a scenario where he's just like a good dude who's trying to be a nice guy because he knows this kid lost his father, be like a good role model for him, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, okay, so maybe that's the story, right? And then, like, all of a sudden, like, Colin Farrell's kid, youngest kid, Bob, his legs stop working.
Yeah.
And it's at this point in the movie where I've lost interest. Like, I really have. Like, I went from, at 11 minutes, being captivated and confused to, at 41 minutes, just, like, totally checked out, want to go play with my phone, like, I don't care. And I did not have that with The Lobster.
Okay.
Well, what The Lobster does is they get right into the premise, the very interesting premise of that movie very quickly, right? That's like from the get-go. It's like they're at this thing, and if they don't find the person they love in 30 days, they turn into an animal. And you know that from the beginning. Where this one, it doesn't really reveal itself until further into the movie. So for 40 minutes, you kind of just get Colin Farrell talking to this kid, and you're like, there's something off about him, but he's just being a good guy, and they're fine, and it's a normal, like, patient-doctor relationship, so to speak. And then they hit you with, like, here's the deal, kill one of your kids or they're going to die, like that whole scenario, right? So It takes a while to get into that.
And we get, it's at the 50-minute mark, Justin, is when that conversation happens. So it's after Colin Farrell's invited Martin over to meet his family. He's gone to Martin's house, had dinner there. You know, the weird stuff with his mom has happened. We also find out that Martin is having a relationship with Colin Farrell's daughter, Kim, which leads to one of the most awkward scenes I've ever seen. Why did they need to do that? That was just shocking to be shocking. We had a great moment with them at the tree when she, like, starts smoking and she's singing for him, right? They could have just been back at the tree. we didn't need to see a teenage girl in her underwear. That was just being shocking to be shocking. And that further pissed me off and made me not want to watch this movie anymore.
You could argue, though, over the family dynamic that happened at the beginning, that this is something that they were just brushed up upon from parents. Because it's the same thing that happens at the beginning of the film. And what do we do?
As her laying on the bed?
Yeah. I mean, we as kids, and yeah, I'll go with that, kids, are in turn to interpret whether we understand it or not and call that the new normal. So maybe that has something to do with it.
What we're referring to is the Kim lays across the bed, very similar to the way Anna does for Steve to try to seduce Martin. And it won't be the last time she tries to seduce Martin throughout this movie. So now we're in the hospital pretty much all the time. And Colin Farrell, Steve, is trying to take care of his kid, Bob, trying to use his clout at the hospital to get the best care for his kid, find out what's going on with him. The hospital chalks it up to an anxiety attack, and that's why his legs aren't working. I'd like to point out at this point, the amount of stunt work that Sonny Siljack had to do in this movie is insane. That is a child. Literally, I don't, how old is he even?
And it's probably 9 or 10 at that point.
Right, so he was born in 2005. This came out in 2017. So he's just shy of 10. He's 8. Right? Did I do the math there?
No. He would have been 12 when it came out, so we'll call it 11 when they shot it.
So,
But when you say stunt work, I mean, let's be clear. He's not being thrown downstairs or anything. It's just a lot of dragged on the floor and sort of walking on his hands, which the girl does too, Sophie Cassidy. But it's a lot of them being dragged around and kind of crawling on their stomachs and things like that.
I'm referring particularly to when Colin Farrell is trying to coerce his kid to admit that he's doing it on purpose, where he's dragging him around, trying to get him to walk, and then he just drops him. And I mean, I watched that scene a couple of times, and it's definitely a person, and I don't think it's a stunt double because of the way Colin Farrell drags the body around.
Well, I don't know if they have stunt doubles for 10-year-old kids.
Right. My best thought was maybe a small person, would be.
Yeah.
But, that, to me, also, the scene is very powerful because we're starting to get the severity of the situation through Colin Farrell's panic and desire for his son to admit that he's faking his legs not working. But I don't know that I needed to see him drop his kid, knowing that he did just legitimately drop that 11-year-old just straight down, right?
Mm-hmm.
That another thing that removed me from the movie.
I didn't have a problem with that. I think that's part of the desperation of a parent who doesn't want to believe that their child is in such a dangerous and precarious situation, right? And they don't know, no one can figure out what's wrong with him. All the tests that they run, both from a psychological and from a physical level, show up negative. So no one knows why his legs aren't working or what's going on. So, I think at that point, the dad just becomes so desperate to figure out what's going on or to prove that his kid's just faking it, that, he picks him up and drags him around and says, come on, walk, and that's just part of the psychological point of view of a parent dealing with a situation so extreme as that, he can't wrap his head around it and can't believe it and tries to desperately, prove that he can walk and fix the situation.
So here's where I get confused now, right? And this is my biggest problem with this movie. So already at this point, Martin has warned Colin Farrell that he has to kill one of his family members or they're all going to die. Okay? They're all going to go through paralysis and the end stages is bleeding through the eyes, yada, yada, yada. So he knows at least at this point about, I'm calling it the curse because I don't know what else to call it, right? He knows about the curse. But in the conversations he has with Martin, it would suggest that Colin Farrell knew about the curse before that conversation at the 48-minute mark. So, if we're now an hour into the movie, Colin Farrell is seeing what the signs of the curse are taking over in his kid. Because he's not eating, that's one of the signs. He's got no feeling in his legs, that's one of the signs. Now I feel like Colin Farrell, like, it's too late into the plot, right, for Colin Farrell to have that kind of a reaction because he knows what he has to do. He knows about it already. So I don't understand this whole like modern medicine will fix this curse thing when he seems to be tied to it previous to his kids getting sick.
What makes you think that he knows about it before that? Because I don't think that at all.
Because Martin says he knows how this is going to go. In the dialogue.
Yeah, but I mean, Martin, in a sense, is trying to. I mean, it doesn't all start until we see him, Colin Farrell's character, start pulling away from Martin. And that's chalked up to mostly of the reaction to his mother that happened in the house. I don't necessarily think that he knew. I think that he says that, don't you? I think that that's a play on that he's a doctor of power, that, you should know all the stuff that happens, because we don't really know the side of Martin's psychosis of how he thinks a normal person reacts and thinks.
Here, I'll say this, and maybe you guys had a different view of it. I think the biggest problem that I have with this movie, or one of them at least, is that the whole thing is never explained in terms of what actually has happened to these kids and how Martin was able to make it happen to them. Like Josh, you just referred to it as a curse, right? But so these kids, for some reason, their legs are paralyzed and they can't move. And then they refuse to eat. And then their eyes start bleeding. But all the medical tests show nothing wrong. All the psychological tests show nothing wrong. So clearly, whatever's happening to these kids is beyond what modern medicine is capable of detecting. But how does some random 16-year-old kid, either know about this or do this in a way that is undetectable by the entire medical community?
So I have an answer to that, and it's only because being a history buff and everything, I kind of recognize the title of the film from somewhere. It's from Greek mythology. Okay. So the whole point is that let me look it up here. I want to make sure I don't get the name wrong. Iphigenia, who was the daughter of King Aga, whatever. Essentially he kills a deer that wasn't meant to be killed from Artemis in Greek mythology. Artemis then decides that you need to abide by some payment in order for this to be justifiable.
Right, and he has to pick one of his kids.
Exactly.
One of his daughters.
So in my mind, Artemis in this movie is represented by Martin. Being that can ultimately, because we see it in the film, right? When the daughter gets sick, he's outside the hospital and he's like, go up and stand. You can do it now. And she regains the ability of her legs for that moment. He has the power of a god in this.
But why? Like, and if he had the power of a god, why didn't he save his dad? Like, I took this, how I read the plot and trying to see between the lines, was that Colin Farrell killed Martin's dad because his dad asked him to, because the family was cursed.
What?
Yeah. That's how I got to it.
I didn't get any of that. I mean,
that conversation...
The dad dies... the dad dies in surgery, right?
Right.
But it's, Colin Farrell says a surgeon can't kill someone, only an anesthesiologist can kill someone. And then later the anesthesiologist says only the surgeon can kill someone, and the anesthesiologist can't kill someone. So it's like the two guys that were there are blaming the other, essentially, right? And we know that Colin Farrell might have been drinking that day, but we don't really know whose fault it was. We don't ever find out whose fault it was that he died.
I just got hyper-focused on that conversation where Martin seems to infer that Colin Farrell already knows about the curse. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into that, and I think this is also where what Austin was saying about the one-tone dialogue, the one-toned acting, bites them in the ass here, because Colin Farrell doesn't give it away with his performance, whether or not he's shocked to learn about this curse, or if he's like, oh yeah, I already know about this shit. I'm going to use modern medicine. You can't kill me with this curse. You can't kill my family with this curse.
Yeah, the only time we really see like a sense of almost like anxiety or something filled with, or a scaredness of Colin's character is right after he hears this. And he goes back down and he finds out that, oh, now he's not eating. And that was the second stage. So then he literally tries to force the donuts into his mouth. Then he starts realizing, oh shit, maybe this is like, because now he's terrified. Because, the first one, that's fine. Like that can be explained, hopefully through medicine. Now he's not eating. That's number 2. And it's like, okay, now I need to put my head together and try to figure out how to do this. But in the ultimate, I think he just crumbles because he knows modern medicine now can't save this. And it's being chalked up to a higher power.
Right. I think it's also important that we point out a scene before we continue with the plot that Martin is desperately looking to get a hold of Steve, Colin Farrell's character, and he's at a barbecue with the anesthesiologist who seems to be his good friend, but is also the guy who's the anesthesiologist on the surgery that killed Martin's father. So that's important to point out. Also, Anna's at the barbecue with him, so it's important to point out.
So you guys are both chalking the plot, the basic element of the plot as far as how he is controlling everything and how they're getting sick. You're saying it's supernatural or otherworldly or godly or spiritual, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because that at no point hinted at or referenced or in any way made clear or presented to the audience at all. At least none that I saw.
Not till the
terms
end.
of like any backstory about this kid or anything that he was involved in that might have like given him these powers or anything. It's just like, here's some random 16-year-old kid. Oh, by the way, he is a god and he can make all these people sick. Like I didn't buy that at all.
I agree. And I think that's what confused me, and that's why I tried to tie in that Martin's dad and Martin's family had the curse. Like that's why I was grasping at straws to figure out how this could possibly be happening.
Yeah. I mean, even if there was a curse, like someone should talk about it or be like, give a little exposition,
Right.
Well,
whoever it be, whether it's the mom or the kid or whatever.
Now, the only thing that I pointed out in the story that relates this to, and it's literally for a second or two, so I don't know if you guys picked it up or not, but right when Colin Farrell's character is at the school trying to learn more about his kids, they mention the story that his daughter had written a story on this exact thing, and she presented it to the class. Now, again, it's like a split second, so that's about it, though.
So,
But I took it as this kid had a tragedy, and now by himself or something else has given him the power to make it right. Because Martin essentially blames Colin Farrell for the death of his dad. That's why he's targeting his family. And it would be too easy to kill him. Now he has to make the point of he has to choose, or in the story of Greek mythology, make a payment in order for the deed to become right.
So we are assuming, or Yorgos was assuming that we recognize the parable from the title of the movie.
That's what I would think, yeah.
And that we're able to string this together.
Yeah.
Is he from America?
No, he's Greek.
Oh! Well, there it is, folks.
Yeah. Well, no, it's there's no question that this is based on that Greek tragedy. I mean, the title of the movie is a direct line in that tragedy, right? So there's no question that's what it's based on. But in modern filmmaking, you need to, if you're going to say like, yeah, this kid has divine power or there's a spiritual element, like you can't just show things happening and assume people are going to know like, oh yeah, this kid, he just has those powers. There has to be some little, at least a hint or a line of dialogue or like just some small thing that tells people that, so they know. I mean, you don't have to, but like otherwise you get into this situation where I don't think it makes any sense how this would have been physically possible in our present day world, without showing somehow how this dude could have got cursed or have powers. Like everyone's just operating under the assumption like, oh, I mean, I guess he just has like supernatural powers. Yeah, it's cool, whatever. But that's not presented as the world that we're going to be in this movie,
Right.
Do you think
it's too normal?
Do you think it adds to the point where directors and filmmakers look at maybe films that use too much exposition and think that maybe that they don't need to go that route because it pisses a lot of people off when there's a lot of exposition in films because they're essentially talking to us like we're stupid. Yeah, now, in this thing, I think maybe that he takes it as an approach of, I don't necessarily think like maybe pointing out the intelligence of the viewers, but maybe making our own draw and inquiries about it. I mean, like I said, the only reason I was able to figure this out a little bit is because I had studied mythology. Mm-hmm. I knew about it.
So here's the deal. This movie's 2 hours and 1 minute long. He spent half of the movie doing what'd you call it? Exposition, yeah. I'm so good with words. Doing exposition with the characters. So if you're going to take an hour anyway to do, relationship building between the characters, at some point in time, you got to tell me the kid is magical. Some point in time, you have to infer it. He has to make something move with his mind. He has to do something that lets me know he's different from everybody else. The only thing I know is that he's a fucking weirdo and that his mom really likes Colin Farrell's hands. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah. Well, look, to Austin's point about being too much exposition sometimes or too much, here's obviously what's going on. That is certainly a thing that happens, yes. And I think there are directors that would prefer people make up their own minds and not give them all the answers. The best example I can think of is probably Christopher Nolan with how he likes to do ambiguous endings and leave things up to an audience to decide. Yeah, exactly. Like that's up to the audience to decide what they want that ending to mean to each and every one of them, right? But everything has to be justifiable, right? If this kid really is supernatural or has powers or something, we have to know why. Otherwise, it's just like you can't buy into it because there's no reason for you to believe that he is. Like there's nothing. The mom doesn't say like, yeah, he got into some dark stuff after his dad died and was reading all these weird books or like anything like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be big, but you also have to justify it somehow. Because again, to me, it's like Josh said, like this is just a weird kid who maybe has some psychological issues, but that's it. And then all of a sudden, he's controlling people's physiological abilities and like somehow affecting these kids' bodies. And like in 2017, when this movie came out, it's like, the movie is just a present day movie. And it feels like that just wouldn't make sense. Why can no one in the medical community figure it out? It's like, because he's a god and he can make it undetected and it's not relevant or anything. Like it can be supernatural and be divine, but it has to also fit in the parameters of the world, which is present day, medically advanced, scientifically advanced American culture, so there's just this weird mix that isn't justified, I feel.
Okay. So there's a point in the movie where I think they could have solved this problem that we're talking about. And I want to get to it when we get there, but I don't want to rush through it because there's some other important things that happen that also confused me. So at the 1 hour mark, the daughter gets sick, Kim, who's in a relationship with Martin. Now her legs don't work. She's not eating. She's in a hospital bed right next to her brother Bob. Good to go. Not good to go, but then Martin makes Kim magically walk to the window, which Austin was talking about. We also find out that Kim knows about the curse because she's telling her mother that someone has to die. So, I guess I thought this was a little wrong. But why couldn't the daughter then explain who Martin is? That he's this Greek god or whatever. Like, this would have been a perfect, very cool, like, plot thing to use to explain the supernatural stuff happening in the movie, because it doesn't have to come out of Martin's mouth. It could have came out of Kim's mouth, and that would have been super awesome, because it's even better because he's manipulated his daughter, and now the daughter is totally on board with killing somebody to save herself, and yada, yada, yada. Like, that would have made it so awesome and psychological, and, like, you're like, whoa, Martin's a bad dude. But instead, it was just, like, weird rhetoric she was spewing at her mother.
Well, the reason that she knows, and is because they, like I said, they later find out that she wrote the tragedy about this and performed it to the class. So she knows from that, going along with this, that's entwined. So, now, I think that she's playing a sense of loyalty here of who to do, because she loves Martin. She says it, but she also loves her family. So now we're at a fork of the road of a choosing process.
So, Austin, in the Greek mythology, do the same symbols happen where the legs don't work, then they refuse eating, then they bleed from the eyes?
Let me think. Hold on.
Because that pot's a giant hole in your theory if it doesn't.
Yeah. Let me see.
And what Austin's referring to is that the play upon which this movie is based, Iphigenia, he's saying that there's that scene where Colin Farrell goes to speak to the principal, and the principal says that the daughter wrote an essay on that play and got an A+ on it. Right. So it's, they're referencing that exact play that the daughter knew very well, clearly. Right. And Austin's saying that because she knew that play, she understood that was now happening in real life to them. Like, the same thing that happened in the play was now the circumstance that their family had found themselves in.
It would have been helpful, though, in the dialogue in that scene with her mother after she walks, if she says, "It's just like the play, Mom, da-da-da-da-da." Because then that gives us, like, some other context other than the name of the movie as to what is going on. But it doesn't happen. She's just, like, mouthing off.
So the main thing that I got from this, she punishes him by inferring the winds so that his fleet cannot sail to Troy, is the main thing that I got. So I don't know if they're anything.
That's not anything like that.
No, I mean, it's not a direct adaptation, and it really, it couldn't be, because that was a Greek tragedy based on the time of the Trojan War. And so circumstances were different than just, a random family in suburban America, 2020. But
so go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to add on to your point before, like, when she said that, when the daughter implies that she knows about it, it was also weird. It's like, okay, like, that was an opportunity I felt was missed. It's like, okay, so either the daughter knows about it, so either she is faking it to keep it going, or she somehow helped him poison the kid or make him sick or whatever. But either way, she's in on it. Right. And we never really get that. I mean, yes, she's in love with him, so she wants to help him. But, we never get exactly, again, what happens and how it happens to them and why she is going along with it, or I don't know. It just, to me, it didn't feel like, it felt very thin and not, it didn't make enough sense to me.
I agree. Okay. So let's just kind of burn through the rest of the plot here, because we're already almost at an hour of this. So, then Anna goes, after the conversation with her daughter, Anna kind of goes on her own fact-finding mission. And she uses sex to get it out of the anesthesiologist what happened that day when Martin's dad died. Now, this is after, I'm sorry, I missed this part. Anna goes to Martin's house, talks to the mother and Martin, or no, just talks to Martin about like everything that's going on, right? Then she goes to the anesthesiologist. There's a line where Nicole Kidman said when she's like, "You have to tell me," he goes, "What's in it for me?" And she goes, "What you didn't get at the barbecue." So that's now inferring that either A, she was already having an affair, or B, was planning on having an affair with the anesthesiologist. Which further confuses me about the foreplay that is referenced. Like, I thought Nicole Kidman wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I didn't know that she was a doctor until way later. So, like, that even further threw me. Like, I thought maybe, like, she was sleeping with the anesthesiologist to, like, so that he would hire her or something like that. And so that relationship even further throws me off of the scent of what I'm supposed to be getting out of this movie. Steve kidnaps Martin. He shows Anna. Martin tells Steve he killed his father and suggests again that he needs to kill one of his children for this to end. And then he bites off part of his own arm. Well, why? Like, if he would have, like, miraculously healed, that would have been another great point to show where, like, he's a god or something, right? If, like, all of a sudden, like, the wound was gone. But it's very clear that his wounds remain because Anna is later taking care of those same wounds, whether they were self-inflicted or done by Steven.
Yeah. Well, his character is motivated by justice, right? So his dad dies, and he feels that Colin Farrell has murdered him. So now this whole thing about forcing Colin Farrell to pick one of his family to murder, that's a life for a life, and that's justice in his eyes. And the reason he bites himself is because he is in the basement, he's tied up, and Colin Farrell's down there next to him, and Marvin, the kid, is saying that he doesn't think that Colin Farrell is all that smart sometimes. And he makes the point by biting him and latching onto his arm because Colin Farrell's too close to him, even though he's tied up. So he bites him and he makes him bleed. And then when the kid sees that, he says, okay, well, to make it fair, and then bites himself. So he gives himself the same wound as him. So it's again, eye for an eye sort of thing with him. Okay. And it's not about showing him healing. It's about his character is motivated by justice and equality and having what happened to someone else happen to another person so that it's even.
Yeah. So that all happens at like the 126 mark. Then at the 134 mark, Colin Farrell's pretty much set that he knows he has to kill somebody to save the rest of his family. He goes to the school to try to figure out which kid is better. So now we're in like a Sophie's Choice kind of scenario. Later, Anna kind of like props him up and says, you know what, it's fine. Kill one of the kids. We can have another one. She tries to seduce him to show that she's still fertile, all that kind of stuff. Then later...
Here's a question. Yeah. Oh, here's a question for you guys. So, at least to my knowledge after watching it, it doesn't ever seem like there's a part where Colin Farrell tries to bargain with Marvin at all. You know, like he goes from denial and disbelief about the whole thing to acceptance. Like if you're looking at the 5 stages of grief, he skips bargaining, right? So he gets angry and he goes into denial, but he doesn't try to bargain with him like, okay, what can I do to make this better besides killing my kid? Or he doesn't try to pretend that one of his kids is dead and see if he can fool Marvin into thinking that. Like he just completely goes from not accepting it to accepting it without trying any like sort of middle ground steps. I mean, did that bother you guys at all, or because I certainly was, I was curious as to why he just kind of jumped like that.
I 100% agree. That's a great thing I didn't even think about, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Why didn't he try to trick him or bargain or any of that?
I think it goes along the lines of his profession. I think that if for a long time, I don't know if it specifies how many years of medicine and cardiology that he's been able to work on, that there's no reasoning in the sense of one who wants justice. Like, if medicine doesn't work, then there is literally no hope, because that's what he's been preached on since he's been working in the field. Medicine is the answer. We will fix it. We will make it right. And now that choice is essentially taken out of his hands, to the point where now he's sporadic and thinking not in the clearest sense of mind to try to figure out how to do this. Now, bargaining is not the answer, because this kid wants justice, and you're not going to satisfy him until the deed is done.
But again, Austin, where in the dialogue does it begin where Colin Farrell says, I trust medicine and medicine will cure it? If medicine can't cure it, then they're a goner.
To the point where he says we need to we need to run the tests again.
That you can't use that as an entire explainer that he believes medicine is the final say. And,
or maybe
if he's so desperately dragging his child around on the floor and dropping him and telling him he's going to make him eat his own hair and like all that kind of stuff, like that's pretty desperate. Why would his disparity not continue through to bargaining and try to beg Martin? Like, he kidnapped him, right? He went as far enough to kidnap him and threaten him. Why wouldn't you try to make a deal with him too? I'm 100% with Justin on this.
I don't know, man. I think that maybe it's more in a sense of ego with him, because he even critiques Nicole Kidman's character's stage of medicine, that if I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Like, because this really isn't your field. So I don't know. I'm trying to make a better argument about this.
Well, and then
so you're kind of thinking that because he's a medical man who spent his whole career in the field of medicine, and that's his whole life basically, like his entire hopes are in medicine, and once they can't cure him medically, he just gets completely unhinged and doesn't think rationally and just starts to, threaten to kill this kid. And like, he's not the kind of person who would think maybe there are other ways around it. He's too deep into medicine. Like, that's all he can think of.
Right. I mean, they incorporate it into their sex life. So if you're doing that with this, it shows that you have a basis mind around the sense of medicine and how it works. And if that doesn't work, great. Your entire sense of what you were brought up on and believe in is completely thrown out the window.
That's kind of fair. I kind of buy that. I mean, not as much as you would like to think this character would be smart enough to, find a different way around this or try different avenues. It's like, not everyone is like that. This guy could just be a doctor who only knows medicine, is kind of like outside of that is just, your average Joe who's not that smart and just does, once that's taken away, he goes haywire and doesn't think rationally. And, not everyone would have the presence of mind to go through certain steps and be clever enough to try trick tactics or other, forms of deception. So I buy what Austin's saying.
Well,
I buy that.
And then to back up Austin's point, Anna takes the kids down to Martin and tries to bargain with him, and she even treats him like a god by kissing at the feet as if it's like a Catholic service. So, okay, Austin, I buy it. I buy that. Then we get this really weird... So everything's happening chronologically, and then all of a sudden we just abandon that with this crazy night where Kim sneaks down to the basement. She tries to beg Martin, like, I love you, we can run away together, just save everybody, yada, 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 right? After that doesn't work, she tries to run away from the house. That doesn't work because she's crawling on her hands and knees. And as, like, all of this is happening, it's kind of being intercut with a conversation she's having with her parents where she's begging her dad to kill her so that the rest of the family can be saved. This again, just, I'm a stickler for if a POV shot shows up and it has no reason to be there, or you're doing storytelling one way and then all of a sudden you just switch for no reason. And right here, we leave chronological storytelling for a montage-esque scenario, but they don't ever let us know that's happening, and it totally took me out of the story immediately. So that really bummed me out. Yes. So then, after the crazy night, Bob's eyes begin to bleed the next day. So Colin Farrell has to make a decision. He duct tapes everybody, puts them on the couch, and then covers his eyes with a beanie and spins in a circle and just fires off shots, hoping he hits one of them. What the fuck?
Yeah.
That was tense, man. Every part of that scene was tense.
Go ahead.
It goes up to the point where everything in his life is so meaningful to him with these three people that he feels that he can't make a justifiable decision on his own. So he talks up to Chance, put the beanie on, spin around, bang. Which I was hoping that they would have done it where he missed a few shots and had the reaction of people. And they didn't really have a lot of that, so I was a little taken aback from that. But yeah, he finally hits one of them.
So he kills Bob after missing Ann and Kim. And then the final scene, which is arguably my favorite part of the movie because it is the most clear cut, right, I guess, where we see the family sitting at the same diner that Martin and Steve used to hang out at. Martin walks in, sits away from the family at the counter. He locks eyes with Kim just as she begins to eat the French fries, which Martin says earlier in the film he always saves for last. She eats them first. I don't know what that has to do with it. It bothers me that they make that he's that part of the dialogue, and then later she eats them first. If she would have eaten them last, body of Christ, given to you kind of scenario, right? And then she can walk again, or I don't know, man. But basically, we find out that Kim has returned to full health, and the family gets up and leaves with Kim walking. Yeah. Movie's over.
Yeah, I think that Austin's least favorite part of this movie is going to be you don't find out what happened to anyone at the end.
I wish they would have done it in sense of a different way. I get why they did it because the exposition came in at the beginning where you don't have to explain why this event occurred. But man, something really wanted me to have him just sit at that table. Some part of me just wanted to see what would have happened. Because there was a point where I thought that when they started getting up, that one of them's going over there and sticking a knife right in his neck. There was a point right there, but instead, they realized what power that he had and chose to make the smart decision and get the fuck out of there.
I also wonder, I kind of read it as that she had not walked yet and that he removed the curse. Because you got to remember, I'm still under that Martin controls this curse or something and that he whitewashes it from them. After they break bread together.
Well, you could argue that it came about right after the sacrifice was made, right? Right after Bob died.
Yeah, you could almost assume that, they're in different clothes. That would have been great if they were in the same clothes. Because then you would know, yeah, okay, so this is the next day kind of thing. Yeah.
I agree. This film might have confused you guys, but I was real dead set on making a weird entry that really would have maybe shocked you guys as film buffs. But maybe that didn't work. I don't know. There's still a lot of parts of me that enjoyed this film. And there are some that are okay, there could be need for improvement. So
I wanted to like.
There's no question that Yorgos is an interesting filmmaker and who has a very distinct style and is very capable technically. I mean, he's certainly a good filmmaker. I think my problem with this movie is that things just weren't resolved, weren't justified. Like from a story standpoint, I just couldn't buy into it once the actual plot kicked in. I just couldn't. I couldn't believe that this random kid was just holding this curse over a family out of nowhere, and they end up killing the kid, and then it's like, okay, we're just all going back to normal, and it's just the plot of it for me was what I just couldn't get into it. Like it was interesting enough that I wasn't bored exactly, but I'd never really latched on. Like I was just barely hanging on throughout the movie, like waiting for it to go deeper. And I don't feel like it did.
Let me ask you this real quick, and I don't want to take too much time with this because we talked about this in a couple other films that we've reviewed. How did the music make you guys feel in this? Because there are some instances of a strong music drive in this film. How did you guys feel about that?
I thought the music was great. I thought it was really solid in terms of setting the tone and the creepiness. And like at first, it's more, the music comes and goes. There are periods of quiet, but at first it's these very sort of shrill, high-pitched, sort of like cringy tones at certain scenes in the beginning to let you know that something is off, right? And then towards the end, it becomes more of this powerful, overwhelming, jarring sound effects. But I thought the music did a great job of capturing the tone for sure. In fact, I was thinking that the music was so creepy and so fitting that if you had taken it out, I think that you would have actually a really boring movie. Like I think for me, what created the tension the most part was the music and not the story. So I think the music was really adequate and not adequate. I thought it was well done.
I totally disagree. I thought the music came and went as for no fucking reason. It didn't seem to symbolize anything. It didn't seem to let you know, like, okay, here's when the magic stuff's going to happen. And at points, it drowned out dialogue that felt like it was important for me to hear. Because I was so confused as to what was going on, every single piece of dialogue I was locked in on. And when the music would come in, it would distract me from what was going on with the dialogue. And it really bothered me. The music really bothered me.
I don't know if I can agree with you on that. I mean, I guess you could say that the music was, in a sense of a volume perspective, louder over the dialogue. But there's one scene in particular that it fits so well, man. And that's when he has him tied up in the garage or the basement or whatever. And he was saying, what are you going to do? You're going to kill me? Then you're going to have to make 4 graves. So if you're going to dig a hole, you better do a big one. And as soon as that hits, he reloads the gun and the music pows in. And I was like, holy shit. This is I was on the edge of my seat for that one, gripping the chair. I was like, oh God.
Yeah. For me.
Is it because it's not the music of The Departed? Is that why?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, if it's not Mighty Mighty Boston, let's get it out of the fucking house. Okay, so let's go. Justin, did you have any images or anything you wanted to go through in this one or no?
No, I finished this movie 3 minutes before we started this.
Fantastic.
So.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do the questions then. Favorite thing in the movie?
Austin.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that I have one, honestly. There were a couple moments that were kind of humorous, but for the most part, I don't.
I thought the tension of the cat and mouse game between the two characters was the best part, because you go from a kid that has essentially lost everything in one person to now dueling essentially with a man based on medical principles. You take that away from him and you watch essentially a rat in a cage try to sporadically find a way out of the situation, and you're left with an ultimate demise.
Okay. My favorite thing was the acting. I thought, in spite of the bizarreness of everything, that the acting was really good. Colin Farrell, I thought, did a great job. Nicole Kidman was very believable. The kids were very good, which is, can sink or swim a movie immediately. But, yeah, I thought the kids were great, including Martin. Martin did a great job of, he's fairly young in this movie, conveying, like, psychologically unhinged.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I gotta go with
that. Barry Keoghan's actually not that young. He was probably earlier mid-20s when they shot this.
Really?
He's 10 years older than that girl that he was their daughter. Even though they're supposed to be like the same age.
Wow. Okay.
The fresh-faced kid, but you know what? I also agree. I thought the acting was awesome. Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, and the kids, everybody was great.
Yeah.
The acting was good. And you know what? The scene at the end where he's spinning around shooting people was interesting. I'll say that. Like, that was a, sort of Russian roulette variation of a guy killing someone in his family.
Right.
I didn't totally buy it, but it was interesting.
Right. Least favorite thing in the movie.
You guys can go first, because I'm sure you guys got a lot.
It just the confused, like the inability, like my having no clue. Like, I don't even know what I want to say about this sentence. Having no idea what the plot is, having no idea who Martin is, like why he's supernatural. Like, if you even just give me a taste of that, this movie is so much better. But because the entire time I'm trying to figure it out, it just falls flat for me.
Yeah, same. There's just no justification for Martin's abilities or, how he can do what he does and get away with it. And there's no rules for his character, I guess, and that bugs me from a story standpoint. I just couldn't buy in. There's no, the ending and the resolution was not satisfactory. So the story I just couldn't buy into it.
Awesome.
Mine was the same tone dialogue. I feel like that really hurt it from a standpoint.
Sure.
Like, if there were a little bit more emotion or even like a raise in volume or something, that might have helped the dialogue out. But you essentially go with that one track tone, as I'm doing this right here, trying to imagine an imaginary line of how that plays out. It doesn't affect the acting per se, but it affects the outcome of what is to come next.
Right.
Like, how do they react? Because they react the same throughout this whole film.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting, if you look at Colin Farrell's character versus Nicole Kidman's character, because they both have that sort of similar quality where they are reading their lines in sort of the same tone. It's kind of flat and all within the same register, and there's not a ton of emotion being showed. Like, Colin Farrell is a much more stoic character in the way that he does it. But Nicole Kidman is so expressive in her face and in her eyes, and it's like, it felt like she was doing so much more than he was.
Yeah.
Not to say that she was better, but she was just, you could see so much more in her face than you could in Colin Farrell's, even though they were both kind of speaking their lines the same, and there wasn't a ton of theatricality and expressions and, voice changes and emotion and things like that. But it felt like they were really subtly acting, which I think is what adds to their performance. The expressiveness of just very small looks and things that happen, in the quietness, I thought were very interesting from an acting standpoint and very different for both of them.
When we get to our recast, I'm going to pick somebody who I think could have met Nicole Kidman at that level, because I 100% agree with you. I thought she.
Well, let's do it. Who is it? Let's do the recasting then. Who do you like?
You just want to jump to that? Okay. So one thing that bothered me was the accent from Colin Farrell. Okay. So one, no one else has an accent in this movie, so that stuck out to me. Second, I don't believe.
What do you mean stuck out to you? Like, it just was weird that he was using his Irish accent and everyone else was not?
Yeah. Second, Colin Farrell, not necessarily a good guy off of the screen, right? He's got a little bit of a bad boy history to him. So for him to play the totally over-the-top, believable good guy character is tough for me, and especially in this movie. So I'd like to recast that character, Steve, with Will Smith.
Big Will. Big Willie.
I think that he would, first off, you can immediately always believe that Will Smith is the good guy. In every movie, you go, nope, he's the good guy. Like, that's so easy to do. Second, Will Smith is so good at this look, that, like, sideways head cock thing, and his lip starts to quiver, and his eyes are real big, and his tears start to run down his face. He's just like, come on, man, we're going to get through this. Like, he's so good at that look in that moment, and I think a little bit more expressive face would have helped this. I also don't think the beard helped Colin Farrell's character at all, because it made him robotic, because you couldn't see the small movements in his face. But
oh man, I disagree with every single thing that you just said.
Okay,
completely. First, the two reasons I disagree about Will Smith is, one, I think Will Smith is too powerful of a presence. He's more powerful than Colin Farrell, just in the nature of Will Smith versus Colin Farrell, right? I think if you had to have him play this very reserved and quiet sort of guy, I feel like that's difficult for Will, even though, like, there are certain roles where he's tried, like Collateral Beauty and 7 Pounds. I Am Legend to some extent, but again, he's the only human on Earth, so there is a certain presence to that. But and also Will Smith as the good guy you were talking about, but Colin Farrell is not a good guy, you know, like, he's presented that way for the first part of the movie, where he's just trying to help this kid, but it's so subtle. But the reality is that he is not the good guy, you know, like, he was the alcoholic doctor who probably killed this kid's father, and you don't get a lot of that sense because he's not angry or violent or any of these things, but he's definitely not necessarily the most noble, or, you know, doesn't have the most integrity. And then I like the beard because it takes away this and it focuses on this. It makes it all about the eyes. And I think Colin Farrell's eyes in this movie were great. I mean, they just had a very pensive and thoughtful look a lot of the time. I think that it added to it because it took you away from seeing Colin Farrell, right? Because you never see that guy with the big bushy beard with the gray streaks, you know? It's not a look that he uses a lot. So I think it was good in character craft, I suppose.
Okay. Austin, who would you recast?
I'm going with Colin Farrell. I'm going to replace him, and I feel like I'm going to replace him with someone who has a little bit of a mixed good, bad scenario, and that one you could tell might have a lot more facial aspects to bring, especially maybe even in dialogue. And I'm going to go with Christian Bale.
Interesting. Okay.
You could see a more unraveling process of when he finds out medicine doesn't work from Christian Bale, just because I'm going straight from I hate myself. American Psycho. Like, his notion of when things are going right to when, oh shit, now they're not going right anymore. That's what I kind of wish I had with this. A more like, and maybe Colin Farrell did it. I think the best scene for him that he showed me that was when he was throwing everything in the kitchen and essentially destroying everything. Mm-hmm. I feel like Christian Bale could have landed that and brought it to more extent.
Okay. Justin?
Pass. Okay. I don't know.
All right.
I'm not good at this recasting stuff.
You're good.
They were casting questions.
Favorite scene? I'll go first. I loved the scene where they're leaving the hospital. Like, that whole, and there's a bunch of scenes inside of it, but that whole part where Bob's leaving the hospital for what, you know, he's fine, he can go home, he's walking, like, and Nicole Kidman is holding Bob's hand as they go down the escalator, and then he collapses. That shot is beautiful. The shots around the escalator are beautiful, and when he collapses, that to me was the most powerful point in the movie, knowing, we're not out of that this easy. Like, this is for real. So yeah, I that was my favorite part, my favorite scene.
When they think it's over, they pull me back in.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with mine, and I really enjoyed the ending perspective of the Russian roulette almost scene, because for the long point of this film, we thought that it was going to be one of the kids that were going to die. Suddenly, Nicole Kidman's character is thrown in because now he's literally lost it and he can't process who would be best. So now we have to decide, okay, how are we going to do that? Let's put a bandana on and spin around and make it the most tense I've ever been in a long time. And I like that. I like being essentially not frightened in a movie, but I love when a moment is passing and you're not sure how it's going to happen. And then let's throw two things at the beginning with it, where two missed shots come in. It's like, okay, when's this actually going to, like, you're toned in, like it grabs you.
Yeah. You realize the percent chance that you were actually going to accurately shoot someone fatally in that situation is like, I don't know, minuscule, microscopic. Like that he did it on his third shot, bam, right in the chest. Good job, movies. Although, okay, hold on a sec. Hold on a sec.
Shoot him in the heart.
Yeah.
He could have survived
Let me ask you
that.
this, though. Does it bother you that Nicole Kidman never showed any symptoms, that they didn't get that far with her being paralyzed or anything like that?
Yeah.
It might have, but I'm taking it as I feel like they wanted to start off with the children because they're not as developed as an adult. So it hits them right away. I feel like if they could have lasted a little bit longer with it, maybe she would have shown symptoms. Or it's all in his head, and he's just like, she'll get it eventually, so might as well just throw her in there.
Well, no, because the kids said that they were all going to get it.
Yeah, I mean,
in fact, I thought Colin Farrell was part of that. I thought when he said the whole family, I thought he meant him too. But at least it would have been the wife, and yeah, we never saw any of that. But I think my favorite scene was when Barry Keoghan first tells him the rules. They're in the cafeteria, and he's like, Colin Farrell says, I got to get back, and he goes, okay, well, I'll be quick about this. So, of your 4 kids, they're all going to die. These are the symptoms, and you have to kill one of them. Okay, that's everything. Like, that was just, it was a really interesting scene. And then Colin Farrell's lack of reaction. But you can, I mean, the way he does it, and this is part of the acting, like, his face doesn't change, but you can see in his eyes him registering it and not knowing, being a little disturbed, but not knowing how serious to take this kid. Like, there's just, you could see it processing. And then the next scene is the kid gets kicked out of the hospital because obviously at that point the threat isn't real. It's just like, a crazy kid talking, but it would upset him. So I just, that whole scene, A, it made the movie interesting, and B, I just like how they paced it. It was very interesting how it was very slow, and then all of a sudden, bam, here's all these rules. And then that was it. So
favorite character?
I'll go first. Martin. Straight up. As soon as he got onto the screen, he acted so weirdly, and so you're like debating on, okay, is there anything wrong with him? Why is he so interesting? What is all this? He essentially glued everything together in this film because everything essentially was around him. Everything that happened revolved around him. And I think the way that he presented it, especially when I think the scene was when he's having spaghetti with Nicole Kidman's character. Like, she's essentially teary-eyed, freaking out, trying to debunk. And he's just like telling a story about how his dad used to eat spaghetti and like how he ate spaghetti. And then he's like, well, I'm pissed. That was the craziest part of this, was that he said that I was pissed more that of this doing of spaghetti than his actual death. And I was like, okay, this kid's messed up, man. Like,
yeah. But there's a weird confidence to his character, which I think comes a lot of times when you have mentally unstable people, but people that are so confident in what they're doing is right and the way they speak and the way they behave. It's like, what they're saying is crazy, but the way they're saying it, the way that Marvin talks is very, he says things with a purpose and he means everything that he says. And it's like, there's a certain power to it. Like in that scene where she's breaking down and he's just eating his spaghetti and telling her this story, and it's like the dynamic between the characters in that scene. It's definitely he is more powerful than her, and it's interesting. I'll say, yeah, he's probably the most interesting character, and I think performance-wise they were all great, especially the leads. But I think from a character standpoint, he is the most interesting.
I liked Kim's character. I wish they would have explored that relationship more, whereas she's kind of like, she's in love with the person that's torturing her family. Like, I really like that idea of a character. And I thought she could have been the one to explain why or what Martin's powers are, like all that kind of stuff. I liked the base of that character, and I think they could have used more of that character in this movie to help like steam out some of the wrinkles in it. And then finally, what is your score?
I'm gonna give this like a 4. Yeah. I think it's a well-made movie. I think Yorgos, I have a lot of respect for him as a director, but I just didn't buy into the story on this one.
Austin?
I'm going to give it a 5. I thought that it was just enough to keep my interest, where there are some plot holes. But then again, like I said, you have to be almost a little bit familiar with the terminology and everything going in, which I didn't understand until watching it. Acting subpar, music subpar, and only a little bit things wrong with it, but what can I say? You guys make good arguments.
You thought the acting was subpar? That's interesting.
No, good. I don't know, did I say subpar?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
you said the acting and the music was subpar. Yeah.
Oh, that's not what I meant. No.
Oh, okay.
I meant that it was good. This is the terminology that I'm talking about.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm like, oh wow, it wasn't that bad.
No, I thought it was good, but it's not. I agree, it's not the greatest thing to come out of A24, and maybe that's why it's low for me is disappointment level.
Okay.
It's no Evil Dead. It's no Evil Dead.
Nothing is the Evil Dead.
No movie is.
I'm gonna go. I'll split the difference. It's 4.5 for me. 4.5. All right. So that wraps up. Oh damn! I took it away. I can't say it without looking at it. The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Now I got it.
There you go.
All right. Cool.
Nice.
Justin, what is next on our plate?
You know what? I haven't picked yet.
Oh, okay.
So TBD. Yeah, just because we got timing issues that we got to work out for next thing and stuff. So cool. I'll let you guys know.
Awesome. Well, this concludes the thoughts from the movies for The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Got it again.
Who's the director?
Thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys. Good talk.